Are we raw yet? Indeed we are. It is Baitman Raw time. Glad to be back on this episode of Baitman Raw. I have a super special guest. His name is Byron Velvick. And if you've ever thrown a swim bait, his name may be very familiar to you. And if you followed the Bassmaster tournament scene, his name is familiar to you. And if you're a female, probably over the age of, I'd say, 25, you've probably heard of him. He was on a little TV show called The Bachelor. But we're not really going to talk about The Bachelor. We're talking about the baits. In fact, we're talking about swim baits. Soft ones, hard ones, big ones, small ones. Where to throw, when to throw it, equipment, retrieve, how to land them too. Byron, awesome guest. So blessed, humbled that he wanted to join me for an episode of Baitman Raw. And we actually had to record two parts. There'll be a little pause break in there. I'll come back on, let you know what happened. But, dude, this is the podcast. If you're a swim bait fisherman or you have questions about swim baiting, this is the one you need to listen to. Now, before I put Byron on here, because this is pre-recorded, I got to let you know, shout out to 6 Cents Fishing. They're killing it right now. The Axis was just released. They're not on the website. Sold out again. Check your local academy. There'll be more coming. The Speedwake, the Catwalk, awesome baits. Use that code BAITMAN. 10% off any purchase. I really appreciate it. That helps me out. And grab that Super 6 sack. That's a really good one. You can save $10 if you use my code BAITMAN Super 6. I'm not going to bore you to death. I'm not going to sponsor plug you to death. Just letting you know what great people Casey and the crew are over there. Without further ado, this is Byron Velvick on Baitman Raw. Byron Velvick, he is an OG of the swim bait. And I actually got a hold of him on eBay through his little eBay account, which is Byron's Bunker, and he is throwing up all kinds of good stuff on there. Byron, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I'm glad to be on it, and thanks for the invite, and also thanks for going to Byron's Bunker and buying a bunch of stuff out of that overstocked garage of mine.
I'll be honest. I would love to just come by there and see what all you really have that you're not putting on eBay.
Yeah, that's the question. It's like what I'm putting on eBay is the stuff that I don't mind, getting rid of it because I got so much stuff, but there's a lot of things I just refuse to sell. I've had some friends come over and go, "Where did you get that?" And I'm like, they go, "You're not going to sell that, are you?" And if they do, don't even put it on eBay. Just let me buy it. And I go, "No, I got a bunch of stuff I don't ever want to sell."
Yeah, that's me. I love the baits. That's what I'm into, and I do collect a few. But I fish with about, if I buy it, 90% of the stuff I fish with, or I've fished with them, and I'm afraid I'm going to run out. I noticed you had some True Tungsten Mad Max frogs on there.
Yeah.
Those are really, really good, but they are really hard to find.
Super hard to find. God, those Mad Max, I couldn't believe how, when I looked online just to see, I'm going through my garage, right? It's at Del Rio at Lake Amistad. It's 30 years of fishing tackle. And I was sponsored by True Tungsten. I was one of the pro staff guys. And so I got all these boxes of True Tungsten stuff, like Berkeley and everything else from back in the day, a lot of companies that don't exist anymore. And man, I'll tell you what, I get on eBay and I see these things are like impossible to find, and people are swapping them for 40, 50, 60 bucks. And guys that know how good that frog is, they're willing to buy a new one in the box for quite a bit of money. And I got a bunch that aren't in the box, so I might as well not open any new ones. That's my theory. I don't need to open any baits when I got plenty of them in my Plano boxes that are used.
Yeah, that I actually like the True Tungsten soft plastics. They basically made a Nico worm before anyone had heard of a Nico rig. They're putting the weight inside the soft
Yes.
plastic, and you could just
Yes.
put a Nico hook in there and go. Um,
Yep. Yep. I got a bunch of those. I haven't even gotten to those yet. It's funny you said that because I saw those in Del Rio last time I was there. My lake house is in Del Rio, and it's not where I live with my daughter, but we live in San Antonio. But I saw that exact worm you're talking about. I think those True Tungsten worms. I got a ton of True Tungsten soft plastic. I haven't even started selling yet.
I can only imagine you've probably got a couple years worth of eBay work over there.
You know what? One of my buddies said this. He said he walked around my garage because I never threw anything away. I'm just a tackle hoarder, and so I got all this stuff from my whole career. And my buddy said, if you take every bait in your garage, make one cast with it, and throw it in the trash, you still cannot get rid of all this tackle in your lifetime. And that's if you just casted one lure each one time and moved on to the next one. He goes, you'd run out of life before you'd run out of lures. And that was a funny comment, but looking at my garage, I think he might be right.
Yeah, that's crazy. I won't say I'm that deep, but it would take a while. It's funny, off subject here. True Tungsten, that was the first real big time tungsten company in the whole fishing industry. I remember being at the Classic in Birmingham, and they had a huge booth, and everyone was wearing their shirts and their hats. And shoot, I started buying the tungsten weights, and they were a game changer because everyone was like, tungsten weights, what's that? And you fished with one, and you went, oh, now this is the deal. And they were huge, man. They had an elite pro staff. If you were on there, they had Peter T, Marty Stone, Iconelli. I think maybe Gerald was on there.
Gerald was, Ish Monroe. Yeah, there was they got all of us. Man, they threw some serious money at marketing, and they really want to make a big presence, a big splash, and a big presence in the industry. You're right on that.
And then they just kind of went away for reasons unknown. I don't know the reasons. I'm not sure I want to know the reasons, but they definitely left an imprint on the fishing industry, and that's what I bought from you. Actually, I bought a True Life Swimbait, which was a little bit ahead of its time with the insertable balls in there. As they put on the package, you can fish it with no balls and wake it. But it's a jointed swim bait, and it's a great entry level swim bait, but that thing gets bit.
Well, that's why I told Livingston when Livingston said, hey, design a swim bait, a hard bait. I was like, I went back to remembering being a True Tungsten Pro Staff guy. I go, hey, Livingston, we need to incorporate that ability to change the weight within the bait. And what really became, was really cool once guys started buying my Livingston swim bait was they were telling me they were taking those lead balls out and putting tungsten weights in there, shoving it full of tungsten weights and basically working a glide bait in 25, 30 foot of water. And you don't get too many glide baits down there in the 20-foot range or deeper. That's not usually what glide baits are known for. But when you just load them up with tungsten, you got this thing going through the water at Lake Amistad. This is killer. That's why I wanted it, because I want to be able to fish a glide bait deep. And glide baits don't fish deep. Even the most expensive Japanese ones, they just don't fish deep. And so the only way to make it deep was to be able to open the body cavity of a big glide bait and shove a bunch of tungsten in there. And that's why the Livingston BV series came out, because I wanted Livingston to give me a chance at making a glide bait reasonably priced, but with the ability to change the weights in it.
Yeah. So I live on Kentucky Lake, and our theory is if you're fishing less than if you're 6 foot of water or less, you're too shallow. We stay out deep a lot here, and I think that's hurt a lot of guys from wanting to buy glide baits and stuff, because they basically see it as, well, it's a shallow water deal. It's a visual deal. Our water's not clear enough, but it's actually really clear now. We've got zebra mussels and all these carp are filter feeded so bad. It's not Amistad clear, but it's 2 or 3 foot of visibility a lot of times of the year. But the deal is, everyone seems to be scared to throw a big bait, but you are never scared to throw a big bait.
It's crazy that back in the day, people thought a Super Spook was big, or a DD22, or the Man's 30 plus was a big lure. And I can still remember people being shocked when a bass would eat a Super Spook or a Man's 30 plus, because these fish, everybody was fishing small baits and nobody was fishing big baits. And the only reason I got into it was because there was a core group of guys that were into the stocking trout situation there in Southern California. And really, it started in Southern California with the stocking trout, the 8-inch stocking trout that they were putting in these ponds in the local lakes around there, Castaic, Casitas, the San Diego lakes. And that was the key, man. That was really the key. And my buddy told me, he goes, dude, before you started winning tournaments on it, the word swim bait didn't exist. He goes, now there's an aisle at Bass Pro Shop for swim baits. He goes, but in my, he's older than me. He goes, I remember when the word swim bait didn't exist in the fishing world. He goes, and that was before you ever went Clear Lake the first time. And we never heard of anybody throwing those big baits like you did. And to take it to the tournament trail and start winning tournaments on it, in the late 90s, before 2000. And that's really when it took off. I started running with it hard in the mid to late 90s when I realized what bass would go after and what they would attack, and fishermen were missing it completely.
Yeah, now you look at Bassmaster, FLW, even Major League Fishing. Those guys have got a swim bait on the deck
All
most
the
of the time.
Yep.
Now, you ask some of the swim bait community on the internet, which is a different breed itself. They're like, nope, contact doesn't count. That's not a swim bait. But I count it. But you're seeing guys throw big glides. You know, Paul Nick, Carl Jacobson. I always mess his name up for some reason. He's a great guy. Sorry, Carl. And then I know a lot of other. Jacob Wheeler throws a glide. I mean, he's probably one. I mean,
everybody's throwing it. It's a location bait. That's the thing about the glide or any swim bait. I mean, yeah, and I know Bass Tricks and Kitex and those smaller baits. Hey, those things weren't being thrown either. There was no soft plastic swim bait. There was no hard swim bait. There was no glide bait. There wasn't even a name for them. I mean, there really wasn't the word swim bait in the day. And really what would happen was guys were throwing these baits, catching big bass in the Southern California lakes on the trout patterns. It didn't have to be a trout pattern. I mean, we were pretty antiquated back then. We were throwing saltwater lures with galvanized hooks, the dinosaurs, the worm traps, anybody that made a saltwater white sea bass, calico bass, sand bass bait, we could try to get it to look as close to a rainbow trout as we could. But it showed you where the fish were. To this day, guys know the power of that thing is if you don't get a bite on it, it's going to at least identify the location of fish. And in the springtime, you can see that fish follow that big glide bait or in that big swim bait, and then chase it back to the bed and see where it's spawning.
Yeah, that's something I've told a lot of guys here. Look, if you're going out there trying to catch 30 fish a day, it's not going to happen. But you can find 30 fish a day with a glide bait.
Yeah.
And I'm not the best at it. I'm still learning all the time. But one thing you said on the Bass Talk Live with Matt Pangrac and Mark Jeffries, I am a huge Bass Tricks fan. That is the swim bait that got me into it.
Yeah.
I bought some off Tackle Warehouse a long time ago. I mean, before about the time you won the Clear Lake event, I bought some and I looked at it and said, now, how am I going to do this? And I figured out how to rig them with the belly hook. About the third cast I made with when I was fishing like a spinnerbait up shallow, and one just crushed it. And then I kind of forgot about it. And then the whole, Skeet Reese, you give him the Bass Tricks, you tell him the deal. He wins the tournament, you get second. Now you threw that and a glide bait.
Gunnersville.
Yeah, in Gunnersville, Tennessee River Lake. And dude, you could not get a 7 or 8 inch Bass Tricks in the country. And then everyone bought up all the 6s. But once us Tennessee River guys figure out how to just rig it up on a jig head right,
yeah,
in my opinion, it's still the best soft plastic swim bait ever made. And Bruce is a good guy. I've talked to him on the phone several times. And I don't think he's making them anymore.
Did he stop making them? Is he no longer making Bass Tricks? I didn't know.
From what I told, Tackle Warehouse is basically almost out. All the shops I know, they're like, man, he's not fulfilling orders anymore. He's going to make his tubes and a few other things, but from what I'm told, he's pretty much done. He's trying to sell the company.
He wanted me to buy it, and if it wasn't for my daughter, I'm raising my daughter full time, and I just can't do it. Him and I talked a lot about me buying Bass Tricks. I mean, I was such a fan of this. This goes back to the first time I won. That first time I won that Clear Lake tournament was on his just a old school. I mean, really, I should probably put 1 or 2 of them on eBay just to see what happens. But these are the baits. I got a bucket of them, and they are just these. They're really dinosaurs. They're old school dinosaurs, like fossils when I dig them out. And it's the Bass Tricks that I won the first Clear Lake event on. And I was calling up Bruce, and he drove halfway up from Burbank, California, and met me during the tournament to get me more baits because I was running out for that tournament when I won the Clear Lake, back in, what was that, 1999 or 2000 or 2001. And that was what, that revolutionized it. But Bruce and I go way, way back to that time, that era. And I thought about buying the company, and it'd be great to run it, but it'd be such a monster to try to run Bass Tricks and still raise my daughter full time like I'm doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got 2 kids. I got an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. I love them to death, but you just don't get a lot of extra time. People are always like, hey, Baitman, why don't you make baits? I'm like, I just rather buy them. I'm not a good bait maker. I don't have the time. But
I can't run a company right now. I can't run it. I got to go pick her up from horse camp here in 20 minutes. I mean, it's like, how do I run a company and pick up my daughter from horse camp?
Yeah.
But yeah, It's a classic bait. It is like I said, it's the Louis Vuitton of small plastic swim baits, or plastic swim baits in general. They're impossible to find. I got a bunch of them. You notice I ain't selling those because I don't know if I'll ever get those again. So I don't sell my bass tricks, and Bruce would get mad at me if I ever did because he gave them to me. As he always gave me whatever I needed whenever I needed it. But there's so many other great baits out there. And here's the funny part. I remember, gosh, God bless him. Tucker, the writer, had said, "Do you ever think swim baits are going to catch on around the country?" Everybody thought it was a West Coast thing only, and everybody told me it's not going to catch on. It's not going to catch on. It works in Southern California. It works on the West Coast and Clear Lake and all that stuff, but it'll never be a national bait. And now look at it. And I remember so many writers challenged me on this, and they were like, they go, "We just don't see it being a national thing. It's only going to be a very specific to the West Coast only." And that was the thought for a long time. And now look at it, like you're talking about with. Now it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I've ran a couple really large tackle shops here on Kentucky Lake, and just the change in inventory. It used to be on the Tennessee River, you couldn't have enough different big worms or big lizard stuff in football jigs. You walk into a good shop now, you better have more swim baits than anything because guys want them. They catch fish and they want to try different kinds. You catch them on a bass tricks. Oh, well, let me try a top shelf style swim bait. Let me try a Huddleston. I've had guys request the Jerry Rago swim baits and stuff like that. Osprey's gotten big here. It's you can get a swim bait down to 2.8 inches like a Kitech, and you can get these great big 9-10 inch Osprey, Huddleston, and they all catch fish.
Yeah, on Byron's Bunker right now, I just sold an 11-inch prototype Rago. I got a fish acre, a 30 fish 30 acre hard bait that's about 11 or 12 inches, and it's amazing the reaction to these fish. You'll catch 4 and 5 and 6 pound bass will come up and knock the heck out of a 12, 13 inch. And it goes back to that thing where all of us have been. Or a lot of us have been reeling in a 7, 8, 9, 10-inch bass or something and seen a stud come up and chase it, trying to wipe it off your hook. That's the deal. Those are swim bait eaters, man. And so I tell people, you hook a 10-inch bass, 12-inch bass, and you see a 7 chasing it. That's the same fish that will eat a 8, 10, 12-inch swim bait if, like you said, they're willing to throw it. But this is not drop shotting. You can't go out and catch 40 a day on it. Read about drop shotting in Bassmaster. Go drop shotting, and you got it down in no time at all. This is a different deal. You got to go out there and throw these things, and a lot of people just can't get confidence in them, and that's the hardest part, is to get confidence in swim baits.
Yeah, it took me a while. Like I said, the Bass Tricks was kind of the precursor for me. I'd caught a few on it, and then I put it on the back burner. I'm a big-time crankbait fisherman. I like throwing a worm, too, and I hadn't figured out how to throw it out deep. And but another bait, we talked about this right before we started recording, was the California Swim Babies, the little E.
Oh yeah.
That little bait's dynamite. A lot of people don't talk about it, and I don't know if they still make them anymore, but that was the first kind of line through I used. It wasn't a big one. I used the 5.5-inch one, but put the treble down there, and I really like casting that thing around flats and off the sides of boat docks, and got some really big fish on that thing.
I actually posted one on Byron's. I put last night. If you look on Byron's Bunker right now, I posted 2 last night. I posted a tiny E, a baby E, and I still got like a hot mama to post, because Art Berry was a really good friend of mine. Art Berry was the one with his brother that started that company. They too are out of business completely, and they've been out of business for quite a while. But California Swim Babies, and that was what they were called. They were a California-based company making California swim baits, and they were kind of like Mickey over there at 316. They were in that same Southern California vicinity, and California Swim Babies was making a great bait. And I got them, but I just can't throw them because I got a whole bunch that aren't in the box. So the ones that are in the box, I'm going to put on eBay because I just can't throw them all. So if anybody goes to Byron's Bunker, I guess they can grab one, because you can't find them anywhere anymore.
Yeah, don't bid on the 5.5-inch one. I'm already leading that one, guys. So lay off a little bit.
I'll keep one aside for you. I got about 20 of them I need to post. So Art was a really good friend of mine. He gave me a bunch of baits. And again, I got plenty out of the box. I might as well sell the ones in the box. And hey, if any of the people listening to this, let me know they heard you and I talking, make sure they mention that on eBay, and I'll throw them something extra, because I'll give them an extra bait.
Sure. You heard that, guys. And Byron, he'll even send you an autographed picture, because I got one of those. My wife, when I open it up, she goes, Now, who'd you buy that from that would send an autographed picture? And it's like, this come from the Bachelor. And she's like, what? She says, no, it didn't. I said, look it up, Byron Velvick on the Bachelor. And she said, you're kidding me. I said, so she Googled it and said, holy cow, can I have that? I said, no, that goes with my swim bait. So,
I sent the autograph picture as a thank you. I decided when I started this eBay thing that I'd just let people know I appreciate them going to the eBay store and buying it. So I'm retired from fishing. I'm raising my daughter. What am I going to do with all these autograph cards? What a great thing to do to thank guys that are fishermen and they're buying fishing tackle and they want to come to Byron's bunker. I'm like, send them an autograph card and thank them for what they bought because I love it. And I appreciate you, man. I really do appreciate you, visiting it and buying things from me. And I promise, I will hold one of those baby E's for you. You like the summer bluegill pattern?
yeah, the bluegill patterns, they made a chartreuse I one. And I got several chartreuse blue one. A buddy of mine from actually Central Kentucky gave them to me. And I don't know what it is about that chartreuse blue pattern here on the Tennessee River. I don't care if it's in a crankbait or a swim bait. They eat it. And I actually just think the bass think it's a bluegill.
They love it. At Havasu, dude, you're right on spot on. I don't care what bait it was. Chartreuse with a blue back at Lake Havasu. Man, I was blown away at how those fish are turned on by that color. And to your point, whatever that combination does to a fish, and I don't care what lure it's in, it really is a neat phenomenon how those fish like the look of that chartreuse and blue moving through the water.
Well, I got this idea. Actually, Bruce Porter told me from Bass Tricks. He told me blue dissipates in the water. It's the last one to go away. The deeper you get, blue still holds its color. And his theory on that is, that's why they bite chartreuse and blue so good, especially deep crankbaits and swim baits, is you're fishing them deeper. They still see that blue hue in them. I don't know if that's true or not. I do know the light spectrum thing is, but I don't know if that's why the bass eat it. But I think they think it's a bluegill and they crush it. So Byron, there's all kinds of guys that are getting into swim baits, whether it's glide baits or joining stuff like the bull shad or soft baits. You got any recommendations for a beginner that's, hey man, I've been fishing a while. I want to kind of get into the swim bait game. What's some stuff I need to look for? Just some basics.
The first thing is if you're going to go colors, just go with a white color. Just go medium size, 4, 5, 6 inches, and go. Just like you do with the Bass Tricks, man. Just go with the lighter colors and go right off the bat fishing mornings and evenings. Middle of the day is always the hardest. Time frame, mornings and evenings when the water's above 60, 62, 63, 64 degrees. In the 50s, it's still a little cold. But yeah, that's it. Just fishing them early and evening, fishing them a little bit smaller for starters, work your way up. You might get some followers. Slow down. Everybody fishes them too fast. My opinion is, guys, don't throw a 7 or a 9, 9 to 1, the 9 something to 1 to reels and the 7 point whatever to 1 reels. Fish a 6, 3 to 1 with a soft tip so the rod's forgiving, and the rod has to be real forgiving in the tip, but load up real well, like a real fast, heavier action rod, but not a broom handle. The big mistake is a lot of guys fish too stiff of rods and they fish too fast of reels. So a slower reel, a little bit softer tip, so the rod loads up. And most importantly, just fish slow and stick with it. Put them in your boat and go fish those for a day. Don't have a bunch of stuff to back. You throw out for 15 minutes and put it down, you're never going to learn. You got to commit yourself to it. And I'd just go spend a morning or an evening throwing swim baits, shallow at first. The deep bite, it's a lot harder. But fishing swim baits shallow would be the big thing I would tell them. And just anywhere that looks really good, but slow down and throw a shad colored swim bait around, and you probably do. That's a good way to get started.
Now, the other question that always comes up, and I think I know your answer, and it's probably the same as mine. Guys going to say, what do you use, mono or braid or fluorocarbon?
I almost always use either. I never use braid. I don't like braid, and I don't even like. Skeet learned the hard way not to use braid with a leader because the knot was giving out on the shock. He broke off some fish. He still beat me, but he broke off some fish at Gunnersville. First couple of days he was dying over what he was losing. I go, stop using braid with fluorocarbon leader. It's a swim bait. It doesn't absorb the shock. So you got to go with something like fluorocarbon or monofilament. Fluorocarbon, if I'm fishing deep, and I need to have sensitivity. Monofilament is fantastic for shallow because it's just so abrasion resistant. It has a little bit of stretch in it, which is important. So it gives a little bit. A 17 or a 20, 25 is hard to manage, but a 17 or 20 like Berkeley XT, something that's just a good abrasion resistant monofilament is really good for bigger swim baits because you're not going to break them off as easily. Fluorocarbon, get a nick in it, you're going to break it off. Braid, horribly unforgiving in my opinion. You get a backlash and the thing will snap off. It cuts itself. And I don't like braid for much for swim bait fishing at all. And I'll just go fluorocarbon deep and monofilament shallow.
Right. Guys always that. I feel like they got it backwards. They buy these expensive glide baits, and they buy Hinkle trout or Hinkle shad, and these all these other brands, and they're $200, $300, $400, and then they spool it up with 65-pound braid, and they go make a cast, and they go, man, I had something wrong in my rod, a bad eyelet, and the braid broke off. I'm like, man, there's no stretch in it, and braid, it just snaps. That's why.
A bad backlash, it'll cut itself. I've had guys do the same thing with these real expensive baits, and they fire it behind me, and they hear it go pop, and they get an override on the spool, and it just cuts the line on itself, and the line keeps going, and they're crying because there goes a bait that's going to slow sink to the bottom for $300.
Yeah, I personally, I'm pretty much a straight fluorocarbon guy, but I do like a mono, especially if I'm fishing shallow water and I visibly see the bait. Like if I'm burning a bull shad. Or throwing, I've got a little bait called a shizzard here. It's a nasty little glide made out in Arizona. Stuff like that, because one, it's a visual deal, but I like that a little bit of stretch, and it's treble hook baits, man. I tell guys, if you don't have to go buy a swim bait specific rod. If you got a rod you can throw a big crankbait on, you've got a rod you can throw a pretty decent sized swim bait on. Unfortunately, due to a little time restraint, me and Byron had to record a second part of this podcast. So now, here's part 2, and we pick up where we left. Byron, we left off talking just kind of basic swim bait setups.
Yeah. We talked about how a real good heavy rod, but with a fast tip to absorb the shock, almost like a big crankbait rod or Alabama rig rod is the ideal rod. I think we left off on rods, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I look for is and again, I laugh when people say this is a swim bait rod because swim baits, go from 3 inches to 13 inches, and so a 13-inch swim bait is going to need a different rod than a 3-inch swim bait by a long shot. So to hear people say, well, this is, swim baits have become such a wide gamut now, and guys are throwing those little 3 and 4 inch swim baits, a little like bass tricks, hollow belly type baits and Kitex and whatnot, and then all the way up to these giant wood hard, mothers, and the depths and the Livingston big bait, the big Livingston bait that I designed, all those big baits, the large ones are pretty big.
Now, did you fish I'm going to assume you did that 2000, I believe it was 6 Clear Lake event that Steve Kennedy won?
I did. And what a heartbreaker that was, because that was one year that I didn't get on him, and he won it on that Huddleston, and I had won that year. I had won that Clear Lake event in 2000, and I was on a swim bait bite, but it wasn't getting the giants. They were under docks. They were suspended under docks more than they were on those big grass flats like the corner that I love at Clear Lake. And there was a big difference there. It was end of big docks in a different part of the lake that I don't normally fish. That was the hot thing, and heartbreaking when you're known as a swim bait guy and there's a giant swim bait bite going on and you miss it.
That's always been one of my favorite tournaments for a lot of reasons, but I really felt that event, it was kind of the second coming. People seen what you did in Byron's Corner with the Rago bait, and there was a huge demand for that bait. And then when Kennedy wins, not only did he win it on a Huddleston, of course, he had hooks galore all over the thing, and he had to throw a couple giants back. He hooked outside the mouth, but he did it on some pretty conventional equipment, a flipping stick, and some old Shimano Corrados. And so sometimes I lean to tell people, listen, if you just want to go out and fish, just find you a good heavy rod and a decent reel that's a workhorse. And
Well,
So
see, that's what Steve Kennedy came up to me when the Swimbait bite was first taken off, and years and years before, I mean, a couple years before that, he asked me because I had won in 2000 when I won the first Clear Lake event. The first time I won it, I was throwing that big bass tricks. I was in the corner, but I was throwing a Shimano Corrado on a flipping stick, and it was an old Daiwa flipping stick. There was no swim bait rods out. This is 2000. There was no such thing as a swim bait back then. And I had this really cool Daiwa flipping stick that had a soft tip to it. And Daiwa made it, and everybody bemoaned it, saying it was just too soft. But it was a good swim bait rod, and I had a Shimano Corrado. So Steve asked me about it because he was ate up with the idea of swim baits, and we were hanging out talking. This is before he won Clear Lake, and that was 2006, and then I won it again in 2010 back in the corner. But at 2000, before 2006, when we were on tour together, I even told him, I said, hey man, the Shimano Corrado, the old workhorse, 55 Chevrolet, standby
yeah,
reel, slow gear ratio with that flipping stick, and he took that to heart and won the tournament on the rod and reel that I told him I used in 2000.
yeah, he kind of inspired the Southern guy to start throwing swim baits. He's there, Auburn, Alabama guy, and blue collar guy, and come out and throwing giant swim baits out there and catching just an amazing sack of fish. But there are a lot of pros throwing it, and the guy I really actually saw throw a swim bait first, if you call a storm walleye a swim bait, was Kelly Jordan, and I
Oh,
noticed he was throwing that osprey around the boat docks.
yeah. Yeah. Again, these guys back east, they were really intrigued by it, and so I was throwing them back east, and Steve was one of those guys that just loved the idea of it, and we would have plenty of dinners and plenty of conversations together about it, and hang out and talk at the campground when we were camping out. He'd come over, look at my baits, and it was blowing his mind early on because I was out there in 2002, 2003, 2004 on the tour with a boatload of truckload of these giant baits, and we were camping out, and Kelly was a friend of mine, Steve was a friend of mine. It was neat because they thought I was crazy, but they said, man, these fish really eat these things, and I'm like, man, they sure do. I think they'll eat them in this lake, back east at some of the Lake Seminole and Clark's Hill, and it was neat to take those baits back east and introduce some of my friends to them.
Yeah, man, it's kind of exciting when you rewatch those old Bassmaster events and seeing how baits and techniques really evolved. And I know a lot of people look at you as a pioneer in the swim bait game, especially in the tournament game. I believe it was, and then you had Rubanis throwing the Bass Pro swim bait there at Amistad.
Yep.
A couple buddies of mine actually remade that bait, and it is top notch. But Man, it's crazy now. When you're throwing swim bait, what dictates you throwing a soft swim bait like a Bass Tricks or a big Kitech or a big paddle tail style bait versus any kind of hard bait like a glide bait or bull shad or something like that? Is it the size of the bass you're targeting, or is it the depth of water, the deal there?
It's really, I mean, you're really targeting big fish. When you're throwing those big wood baits and the big live baits, I mean, it's almost trophy hunting, and it's also a risky thing to do in tournaments because it's a low percentage bait. Those fish have a real knack for getting off the hook on those big baits. And if you're not allowed to use a net, which you're not allowed to use an elite tour, that really handicaps you because now you're trying to lip this fish that has a mouthful of treble hooks and it's a big bait, and it's a tougher bait to throw in tournaments. Those big hard baits and the glide baits and the as much as I love throwing them, I tried to throw soft plastic more than soft plastic swim baits just because the hookup ratio is better. You were dealing more with a single hook, not a handful of treble hooks with, especially again, a no net tournament, which is what the elites were, really almost decided what swim baits I was going to throw because I lost so many fish on those big hard baits. I love them, love them, love them, love the reaction the fish have to them. Enjoy fishing big glide baits, but you get your hands full when you get them close to the boat. It is a slower stalker kind of bait. You really got to slow down your cadence. And you are targeting bigger fish. I think the soft plastic is so much more versatile. You can rig it on a jig head, fish it real deep, open water. You can rig it on a belly hook and get that thing up shallow and run it right through the middle of the grass and deflecting off wood and everything else. I mean, it's surprising how great the Bass Tricks type swim baits are with a big belly hook in them. Completely weedless. Throw it up there into a laydown and roll it right through the middle of a laydown, and it comes right through the thing effortlessly. But the soft plastic's just a higher percentage tournament bait, and for just absolute fun and reaction of big fish to something that completely blows their mind, then the big hard bait is key. I mean, even here around Texas, there's a little creek right here in Bernie, and one of my friends was talking just the other day that these big females were getting ready to spawn, and they were hanging off the nest out there suspended, and then you throw like an 8 or 10 or 10-inch big glide bait, Livingston type BB3D, not the BB3D, the Viper or the Venom, that kind of Livingston bait, or those glide baits out there, and roll it by there, and the fish just go nuts. They come out after it and they smoke it, and they push the little male out of the way and annihilate that big bait. But then again, you got your hands full after it happens.
I think I think I heard this on the Bass Talk Live, and I could be wrong, but you're more of a fan of the shad style versus a bluegill style bait, correct?
For the elongated body, yeah. And I learned something a long time ago. A friend of mine that was fish biologist, he told me that, fish are wary. I mean, they know that an elongated bait is an easier fish to eat. The silhouette of a small salmon, a trout, another bass. Those are easier. When they smoke those, they can actually ingest those. They take a risk when they eat a tilapia or a bluegill, and they do eat them. They crush them. They attack them. But I think a lot of your listeners can probably agree with me that we have found those times when you find a fish floating on the surface that ate a bluegill and it got stuck in its mouth, and there it is dying on the surface because it tried to swallow a bluegill, can't pass it through its head to its belly because it's too big, but now it can't regurgitate it because of the spines. Just the other day at Choke Canyon, we had another one of those where I found like a 5 or 6 pounder in the grass. I saw it, and before anybody else, we were all out there in a group and a couple boats, and I said, I know exactly what that is. I could see it flopping around. I go, oh my gosh, check this out. And I knew what was going to happen. We pulled up to the grass at Choke Canyon. I grabbed the fish, and he had like a good, palm-sized bluegill shoved in his mouth. He's 5 or 6 pounds, and they're both going to die. They'd washed up into the grass and they were both still alive. And so I took my pliers, I unhooked the bluegill by grabbing him and kind of getting his spines down, and pulled him out of the bass's mouth and let the bluegill and the 5, 6 pounder go. And my friends were taking pictures and freaking out. And I go, that's probably the 8th or 10th time, I've seen that just here in Texas. Amistad, that happens. All these lakes, they eat these bluegill, they can't pass them, and so it's a riskier profile for a fish to eat. They do hit them, but I think they hit the long silhouette baits much better because it's just genetically it's easier for them to actually swallow that fish.
That's crazy good information. That's the stuff I've been wanting to hear, because I personally, Byron, I like stuff that imitates a gizzard shad. TVA lake, our population of gizzard shad, that's what the big bass eat. And now, unfortunately, Kentucky Lake, now we got Asian carp, and right. the bass will eat the baby carp, but they grow so fast. A 13-inch carp, I mean, it's less than a year old, but our bluegill population is also down. So I try to stick to my gizzard shad profile stuff. We get those skipjacks. Some people call them Tennessee tarpon. The bass eat them, but they're nice and slender too. So, dude, that's great info. I get asked that question all the time.
Everybody talks about the hitch, the California hitch. People didn't know what a hitch was until that first Clear Lake tournament. They thought that's where the boat meets the truck, so the word hitch didn't really exist anywhere. Like, what do you mean you're throwing a hitch? Like, isn't a hitch the ball and the truck, and they come together to put the boat on the trailer? I mean, it was comical because the word hitch was nothing. But hitch, Clear Lake, that's a silhouette. That's like a baby carp, long silhouette of a baby carp. It's like a little 8, 9, 6-inch baby carp.
Yeah, the first person that really actually told me, really got into what a hitch looks like and the color and everything, was a guy out in California. You probably know him, Todd Big Daddy Woods. He's told me all about what a hitch actually was. He fishes Clear Lake quite a bit.
So when I first won Clear Lake, and it was 2000, I was out there with my friend John Broussard, who lived there, and he took me to a place. He said, hey, there's a bunch of big fish in this part of the lake over here by this marina. And we were fishing around the docks and fishing around the marina, and I looked out in the water and I saw this fish skipping across the surface, and I saw the boils behind it, and it looked like tuna chasing a mullet, or chasing an eel. It looked like an ocean scenario, or a big herring running for its life. It literally looked like a herring skipping across the surface with these giant boils behind it. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. I go, and the biggest thing I had in my boat, well, I had swim baits, but I was fishing against him because it was a Bassmaster. It was that Bassmaster event that I won. But it was pro on pro, but we were just friends fishing together because he wanted to practice with me. And we threw a super spook out there. We threw a jerk bait out there that wouldn't touch nothing. But I was like, I go, what is that? He goes, that's a hitch. I go, what's a hitch? And he goes, that's in this lake. There's these small looking carp things called hitch. They winter shallow, and then the bass eat them. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And in my head, I went, well, I think I got something in my Astrovan that looks a lot like that. I can paint it brown and green with markers, and I can make a bait look like that. And that's how I won that tournament, was those hitch in that corner.
Wow, that's crazy. My buddy Mark Menendez, I do a little filming with him. He has a local TV show, and he said if there's one, he's not a huge swim bait guy. He said the only thing I know, Kevin, he said no matter where you go in the country, if you have a swim bait color light hitch, you have the right color.
Right. Yeah.
It's just very universal. Yeah. It works out here. It works up north. Obviously, works out west. The guys in Texas.
Japanese have IU, so IU is a lot like that, and that's why I was attracted to IU, because IU, when Japan started coming out with the IU color, I'm like, man, that looks a lot like a light hitch. It has a similarity to it. So again, IU, light hitch, those are just great universal colors.
You talk about some people that are really obsessed with swim baits now. The Japanese seem to really be trying to reinvent the wheel over there. I mean, some of the stuff they're putting out is crazy. A lot different than some of the U.S. stuff.
Yeah, they are. It took off like gangbusters there too. Again, it was in that same era in the early 2000s, and they were coming out, and it was neat to have that because they were so West Coast driven. So they were kind of at the forefront of it because swim baits were getting hot, after Clear Lake, and us kept winning other tournaments. I won Orville on it, Don Pedro on it. I won those other tournaments out west on it. And in fact, I had a Japanese writer with me from Japan for Bachelor magazine with me when I won Don Pedro. And so he was losing his mind, and Bachelor magazine was doing stories on swim baits because that was 2003 or 2004, I believe. That the Japanese were kind of coming to the West Coast and doing a bunch of media blitz with the pros going. I went to Japan like 6 times, doing the sports shows and whatnot. It was a neat time. It was a neat time to go there, and they were like you said, they were freaking out about that because in their waters there's a bunch of unique big fish that the bass were smoking.
Yeah, and what I've learned about Japan, and when I worked for Mike Otten, and he was doing the classic pattern show with Lucky Craft, and so obviously I had a lot of communication there, and I didn't know it at the time, was that bass are looked really down upon by the government there in Japan, but as far as the people, they're just obsessed with bass fishing,
Yeah.
And
the government
there's
them because they're an invasive species, and they're wiping out the indigenous fish that were there. So there was a businessman that actually brought bass. It's already back to a 1950s businessman that brought fingerling bass back from the U.S. and started stocking the lakes. An interesting story about that, but those fish are completely, I mean, they know exactly when they showed up and who brought them. And there was a Japanese businessman that brought fingerling, avid fisherman, but he started putting largemouth bass in Japan. And it's sourced back to one guy, and the introduction of bass to Japan, and then the big uproar was the nature minister was like, hey, these fish are wiping out these indigenous, native little trout and little water things that were, cherished by the Japanese. And it like a snakeheads to us back east, the bass are looked like that. With non-fishing people look at bass like snakeheads.
Yeah. It's just the one other thing I know is the fishing pressure over there. You'd think you got fishing pressure here. Lake Biwa, it's insane. And so that's why you're always seeing these crazy ways to throw a swim bait, figure eighting it, these big giant ones, and these itty bitty smaller than micro soft plastics that don't even do anything. But they figured out how to catch a giant bass over there.
That's the either go ultralight with light line and ridiculously small hooks, or else you have to go the traditional middle sized bait is nothing out there. It has to be ultra small, or after the renaissance of swim baits in the 2000s, it has to be ultra big to go out and above what the fish used to. We all used to think a DD22 or a super spook was too big for a bass to eat. That was the mindset 20 years ago, was that a bass, how could a bass eat a super spook? How could a bass eat a DD22 or a man's 30 plus? I mean, those were giants to us. Those were, massive Tyrannosaurus Rex baits. We couldn't comprehend anything in the 6 to 8 to 10 to 12-inch range, but the bass could, and that was why it made it so fun.
I always find it funny how many guys will buy a 10 to 12-inch plastic worm and they'll scoff at a 7-inch swim bait and go, "Oh, that's too big."
Yeah, right.
And then my buddy Ben Parker comes out with this 8-inch Magnum spoon that looks like a hubcap and just crushes fish down the Tennessee River chain. And sure, there's guys up north catching smallmouth on them.
Yeah. I got some of those in my bunker right now. I actually put. I got a couple of those big giant flutter spoons I got to put on there this week, because I'm looking at all my stuff right now to put on eBay this week, and that's funny. I got a whole bumper crop of stuff. I go, well, when am I going to throw that big spoon again? I'm not on tour anymore, so might as well sell those, because at Amistad they just don't eat them very well.
It's like a really fun bite when they bite that thing. I mean, they hammer it, but you better be doing some work in the gym beforehand, because if they're not biting it, it's just not fun. I want you to talk about Byron's bunker some more here in just a little bit, but I got to ask you a question. I get asked a lot, and I have my theories. The line through swim bait. When is the time and place for that? And I think most people understand the theory of the line through is when they bite it, it slides up your line. You've got more leverage against the fish. But is that something you like fishing for suspended fish or above weed lines or around docks? Go in a little detail on the line through.
I love the line through for over grass beds, which seems weird because it's got a belly hook, but that's what I won Clear Lake on the second time in 2010, with that line through with a hook below it. And it was the right kind of vegetation that wasn't getting caught on it. You could pick it through the grass and it'll catch on the grass, but if it's the right kind of grass, you could pop it off that grass. And that was the trick. Even though it's a treble hook on the belly, now if you got hardwood there, you're going to get snagged, but if it's just grass, it's a great bait, and it's really good to throw for. Again, the great thing about a line through is the hook is on the belly. Fish come up from the bottom to eat it, and once they do eat it, the bait just slides up and gets away from it. So line throughs are really good. I don't use them as much around. I use them for shallow water applications. They're really not easy to fish deep. They really do run great up to about 5 or 6 foot, 7 foot, and I've actually put bullet weights on the nose of them to get them down deeper, where I'll put a bullet weight directly in front. I'll just slide that up the line, pegged or not pegged. I don't know if it matters really. Depends on when you're casting it and how it's flying. But putting a bullet weight in front of on the line first, and then putting the line through in, so the bullet weight comes to the nose of it. If the bait's built right, it'll actually run properly with that weight just above it, and it'll weigh it down. But typically at that point you can just go to a jig head, which is better for docks, open water, deeper water. But the line through is great for shallow water if the vegetation is forgiving enough to where it's not the mossy duckweed stuff that gets stuck on there. And if the hook is not catching all of the grass, or if you can run it over the grass and you can keep it just under the surface, it's great when they come up and grab it and they hit it from the bottom, and it's a full treble hook instead of a single hook on the top. And so you're going to land a lot of fish with it, because once you have the fish connected, you have a bait sliding up the line, and you're basically just hooked onto a nice size fish with a treble hook only. So it's a very low percentage bait for the fish to be able to throw. And I liken that to the 2000 Clear Lake event. I love Bobby Barrick for this. He came up to me after I had 15 fish for 86 pounds or whatever that BASS record that they still have, for the heaviest winning weight for 3 days. So I had 3 days, 15 fish, 86 pounds or something. Bobby Bear comes up to me. He goes, "Hey, I don't want to hear about the tournament other than you tell me what you lost." I love that he asked me the week after the event. He goes, "Tell me what you lost." Because he goes, "If you had 85 pounds for 15, what the hell did you lose?" And I wanted to give him a hug through the phone. I go, "Dude, thank you. Nobody wants to hear about what I lost, but the fish I lost in that tournament blew my mind. I couldn't put a the kickers, the biggest fish I hooked, I lost every one of them when I caught that 85 pounds because it was a jig head. It was not a line through back then. It was the early days. It was a saltwater basically swim bait, giant hook, single hook with a big head on it. And it's like if you stick it in your hand and you shake your hand, you can throw that thing out of your hand. If you have that bait stuck in your palm and you start shaking your hand furiously, it'll rip out. Well, that's what it was doing. It was ripping out of these big fish's mouths when I'd hook them. And I was losing so many big fish that tournament. I won that tournament by 10 pounds. The second place guy was Skeet Reese, funny enough. My buddy Skeet was second. And I beat him by 10 pounds. And I lost every big fish in that tournament that I hooked. And I'm saying like 10 plus because they would just throw the hook. And I couldn't land them. I mean, they were just, and it was not a line through. It was the big jig head hook. And it was just hard to control them. And that's where I think the difference is when you're throwing that top hook, the fish you got a limited amount of time. If they jump a couple of times, you're in trouble unless they choke that thing. If they got it at the side of their mouth, they're doing everything they can to shake it. And it's a lot easier to shake than a line through. So that's key if you're, depending on the fish you're targeting to go line through versus top hook.
Yeah, that's, again, phenomenal stuff. When I throw a line through, and I really like throwing a line through, that's kind of my spring fishing spawning flats. I like fishing it around stumps that I can visually see and stuff like that. And dude, it's a killer bite when you can see one come from the bottom and crush it.
Yeah, that's great targets there. Stumps, grass, anywhere that you can almost keep your eye on the bait, or it's just subsurface, or picking the grass, the shallow grass, if you can get away with it and it pops off the grass because it's an early spring grass. It's a real hardy, it doesn't have a lot of moss and junk on it. It's not a summer grass. It's an early spring grass, and it's really young and it's really strong, and the water's chilly, so you don't have a lot of stuff to get on that hook. That's when the belly hook is excels. But then the top hook is great for around docks, open water, and 90% of the guys just like the top hook. It's just an easier one to throw.
Yeah, I think the only downfall is losing fish. But what about any tricks to keeping those fish pegged? I know Matt Pangrak talked about, he noticed this, and I never noticed it till he brought it to the attention. So shout out to Matt Pangrak. Was when you hook a fish and you get it about 6 to 8 feet of the boat, you dump the rod, you grab the line, and you're using your hands to pull that thing in. And I'll be honest, I do that all the time. My tournament partner's like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I always land them like this. I never really thought about it other than it worked,
Yeah, he pointed that out to me. It almost embarrassed me when we did that on his show. When we did Bass Talk Live, and he says, dude, I've never seen anybody do this. What's the story? Why do you throw your rod down the hand line in the last 20 feet? That for me became, the rod can't handle what's going to happen at the side of the boat with a swim bait fish. It almost becomes mono a mono. You become old man in the sea. I mean, the rod is out there. It's 7.5 feet long. It's almost 8 feet long because it's a swim bait rod, for God's sakes. And it's flexing and bending. It's doing what it can. But when you get close to the boat, you got 8 foot out there, and you got this fish that's going to light up and be jumping all around the boat, and you lose them. You just lose them. Years and years of doing this. I mean, swim bait since like 1995, 96, right? So I don't know how many years that is, but mid 90s, I started throwing these things, and by trial and error, I knew what I was doing, and I could see where the rod was costing me so many fish. And I'm like, I can't do this. You get the fish close, and then you just get that rod away from them. The rod almost encourages them to jump because it's up high. It's higher than your head. You got your rod, so it encourages them to get up, jump, and tail walk across the side of the boat, and then they throw the bait. If I grab the line, jump down, and hand line that fish, as weird as it looks, old man in the sea, and Matt did call me out for it, Bass Talk Live, and I was laughing. I'm like, no one's ever asked me about this before, ever. But it helps me land the fish. It just becomes this thing where you can keep the line down, and you can feel them run a little bit, but you can ease them up to your hand, then you can slip your hand down there. And again, with no net tournaments, and that's where it came in. No net tournaments. I got to lip these fish with a swim bait. I got to hand line them to me. I can't do it with a boat. And the classic Kevin Van Dam rod up in one arm and thumb down the other, and your thumb is going to just reach in there and slide into the bass's mouth. That doesn't work with a swim bait, man. That's you're going to lose the fish with your rod up high and your arm stretched out doing the traditional Bassmaster lip 'em pose. That's the end of your day right there.
Yeah, it's a little easier for KVD because he's usually chunking a spinner bait or something like that too. I haven't seen him on the Big Swimbaits, but I have seen a picture of him with some bull shads before, so I know he's got a few in his arsenal. He's not dumb. He's a good
Yeah.
fisherman, obviously. All right, Byron, let's talk about a few baits real quick. What are some old school? My guys like the old school stuff. What are some old school swim baits some guys should look for if they come across any?
Well, I know we talked about the baby E's, the tiny E's, the ospreys, the old Huddlestons. I've been selling those. It's funny. I got a bunch of those. Those old Huddlestons, the ones that come out of mesquite. When Ken Huddleston was making them in mesquite, not when he's making them now over there in Las Vegas, or I don't know where they're coming out of now. But I actually had a guy that lit up when I first put those things on eBay, and he's like, "Where did you get those? Because those are, if they're still in the package and they say mesquite on them, it's just like everything else. They're just a different plastic. They're a different, softer bait. So the Huddleston mesquites, the baby E's, tiny E's from the California Swim Babes. I got these smack baits, the smack bait swim bait. It's a USA bait. Bass tricks if you can find them, but good luck with that. They're not easily found, and I love bass tricks. That's God, there's so many of them, man. Oh, there's so many old school ones that have kind of gone away that I used to cherish, I used to love, and I have a few of them, but a lot of them, they get that lead blush to them, which I don't think it hurts the fisherman, but it doesn't hurt the fish. I think for fish, I told my buddy, we just fished Amistad this past week, and he was like, "You think they'll eat that one with all the white on it?" I go, "Man, it looks just like an injured fish." I go, "That's a lead blush from sitting around for so long." I go, and fishermen think that's a flawed bait, but if you see a fish swimming in the lake that's half dead, he's got white blotches on it all the time.
Yes.
And my buddy Rod Lee goes, "Man, you're right." I go, this looks more natural like an injured fish than these perfect swim baits that have all the perfect colors. The lead blush makes it look hurt. I mean, I've seen fish on they got a white tumor on them with half an eye missing, and you're like, that fish has got about one more hour to live before a bass smokes it. Yeah. Well, if you're throwing a swim bait with one eye missing and a white blotches all over it, you probably got a pretty good swim bait on you.
Oh man, now you're getting into something I always picture. The guys would be talking, "Baitman, I bought XYZ bait and the eye fell out. I'm disappointed." I'm like, dude, you all see the ones I catch a ton of fish on. The eyes are the first things to go, and they like eating stuff that's missing one eye or chunks of paint's gone, stuff like that.
These lead impregnated ones, I mean, they're actually bubbling up white from the lead inside because they've sat in tackle boxes for so long. And, I won't even put those on eBay hardly. I put a few on, but I'm like, you know what? Those things have gotten white tumors on them, and I kind of like it because that's not, there's nothing wrong with this, what I call white lead blush, and white lead blush on these older baits. Don't shy away from those, man, because anything in nature, you just like you said, dude, just like you just said, the most beat up baits you have are the ones that get the most bites because they just look like they're just half dead.
All right. So I actually got like 4 osprey top hooks above me that they all have got that lead blush in. And what I was told from Tim Evans, who owns Scottsboro Tackle, he pours awesome swim baits. It's been in the news a lot. 'Cause a lot of guys are winning a lot of money on it. But he told me that's an oxidization, if I pronounce that right. I am from Kentucky, in the lead meeting with the plastic, and just there's not a whole lot you can do. You can store them however you want to. It may prolong the process, but that's going to happen. But there's a way some companies have figured out to kind of stall that.
Yeah, a lot of my belly hooks, I have a bunch of swim baits I just leave hooked on the belly hook, and the belly weight will turn completely white underneath that hook. I got them in my box. I was just looking at those the other day too, and they've sat in my box for so long with the belly hook still rigged on them that the bottom of the hook, the whole lead has completely become white, and it's exposed from the bait, but it's touching the plastic. To your point, it's touching the plastic. And belly hook weight. I love belly hooks in swim baits because it really does, in my mind, it looks like a fish might be chasing a smaller fish. And I even told Rick Clun, and I used to talk a lot about swim baits. I remember telling Rick, I said, "Rick, that belly hook, that little belly hook, the way it wobbles back and forth underneath that bigger fish is almost like throwing a bottom spin, but it's not a spin, it's the actual weight. So the chrome doesn't bother me of a belly hook weight because it almost looks like a fish might be busting up a school of small minnows, and there happens to be one underneath the big fish, and so your belly hook works as an attractant. I do love. I mean, that's one of my favorite ways to rig a swimbait is with a owner beast hook.
Yeah, I was going to say now Owner makes that beast with the flashy spin on the bottom, and I think even Trocar makes one that's got a little spinner on the bottom. That's gotten really, really popular. Uh,
Yeah.
But hey, we were going to make this kind of short and sweet this morning, and you said, "Man, I'm going to have my coffee. I mean, I'll be ready to jabber." And we're at about 30 minutes, and I don't want to. I want to make sure we don't wake your daughter or anything. But let's talk a little bit about Byron's Bunker. I've been on it. I'm going to put a link in the description to this podcast and YouTube cast in the description. What all you got going on there other than the swim babies and some Huddlestons? And you're going on vacation. Are you going to shut it down for a little bit?
Well, I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to sell a bunch of stuff this week, and next week I'm going to put some more stuff up, and then early part of July is my daughter's birthday, and I'm going to take her on vacation for a couple of weeks. We're going to be out of town, and then I'm going to come back to it. But what I've been doing is just cleaning out my garage, and I was one of those guys that never threw anything away, and most of my friends just brought dumpsters and threw all their stuff in the trash, and I wish I'd been there for that because I should have taken it all, because here we are, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years later. I got a bunch of 2 tungsten stuff. I'm looking at these Picasso spinner baits that Marty Stone was promoting, and a bunch of old gulp baits, and wave worms. I got a ton of wave worms and gulp and jack baits, and so these companies, they're all out of business, and there's some Kencraft Japanese baits. All these Kencraft crankbaits are from Japan. Well, Kencraft was only in Japan. That was like the predecessor to Lucky Craft. So here's Kencraft stuff, and nobody even knows what Kencraft is. And I'm like, just put all this Owner Cultiva and everything else on eBay, because the joke was I got more lures than I could possibly fish if I just made one cast per lure and then threw it in the trash. I still couldn't get them all cast one time before I die. So I think I need to get rid of like 90% of my stuff and just keep a few favorite swim baits, maybe a couple worms, a couple crankbaits, and I'm not fishing tournaments anymore. So that's why I don't mind talking about this stuff with you and sharing any information you have to your listeners.
I hope that you'll want to come be a guest again. I don't know if you even watch the tournament scene anymore. That's why I really haven't brought too much of it up.
Yeah, no, I don't watch much of it. It's hard to watch. It really is. I don't want to know too much about it. I don't follow it because it's painful. It really is. I mean, I love being a dad and raising my daughter full time, but I feel like I was forced to retire early, and I'm getting rid of all the eBay fishing stuff at Byron's Bunker just because I got this tackle, and I'll never be back into it again. So I'm going to be another 10 years of home. And, when she's sleeping like this, I can just grab a bunch of stuff, take pictures of it, put it on eBay, and let somebody else enjoy it. And guys are catching fish on. If any of your listeners buy anything, just make sure they mention that they heard us talking, and I'll throw something else in for them, because I appreciate, listeners like your listeners and your audience. And of course, the guys on Bass Talk Live that all got a hold of me and said, hey, heard your stuff. Thanks for the information. Maybe you should do a YouTube video on swim bait someday. And I'd love to do all that, but boy, when she wakes up until she goes to bed, it's all hands on deck, especially with this crazy COVID thing. It's really curtailed, kind of.
We kind of talked via text message. I had to be Baitman the teacher. My wife had to teach our son. He's 7, and then I've got my little girl. She's 2, and of course, while we're trying to teach him, she's wanting to jump in and all that, and it was rough on a man. It's
rough, man. You're the custodian. I made a joke. You're the custodian. You're the PE coach. You're the school teacher. You're the parent. You're the cafeteria worker. Because about noon they need lunch. So you got to feed them, and then while they're learning, it's. And now there's no summer camps. I can't put her in summer camp and even have my free time. I got to figure out what play date we're going to do today.
Yeah,
for you, brother. I know you got it too. I feel for you big time, bud.
But dude, I tell you what, there's not much better feeling than being a dad. Just going to be honest with you. And I got mad respect for somebody that puts their family over their hobby, or even in your case, it was really a career. It's funny. We call my son now Baitman Jr., but his nickname used to be Swimbait, actually.
Is that right?
The first time he went fishing with me and my tournament partner, we were on a really good, bite. It was, late May, 1st of June, prime Kentucky lake. And we'd caught a few big fish on a spoon and some other stuff, and he was kind of getting bored. And he's going through my tackle box, and he pulled out a couple packs of swim baits, and he's just kind of playing with them. And we're catching fish, and I kept hearing something. I look back, and he's throwing bass tricks off the side of the boat. I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Swim bait, Daddy." And then on the way home, he wanted the swim baits, and I got a picture on my Facebook or whatnot. He's got 2 swim baits, just playing with them like the kid would play with, Star Wars toys or whatnot. So he got that nickname.
How old was he? That's a great story.
I think it was about 3.
Oh my God, swim bait daddy. That's great at 3.
And man, I'm telling you, when it was bath time, there was no rubber duckies or this. He said, "I want the swim baits." He played with them all the time. Now he's all into playing Xbox and all this, but he does like coming in the bait room and tinkering around. He still likes the swim bait stuff. But dude, I'm gonna let you get off here. I'm gonna fuse our little podcast together. I'm gonna upload this thing and let the world hear your thoughts on swim baits, how to fish them, where to fish them, all that stuff. And I am very flattered and honored to have you on here. I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit nervous to even ask you through an eBay message.
I'm glad you asked. I mean, I really enjoy this. This is great to be able to go talk about this stuff and reminisce. For me, it's wonderful. And I do appreciate the invitation to come on the show and talk to your listeners and share these thoughts, because I've forgotten most of this stuff. I'm more into braiding hair and American Girl doll stuff and making breakfast. I'm in daddy mode, so it's nice to go back to fishing mode and share this kind of conversation with you. So thank you so much for the invitation, and hopefully your guys maybe grab some cool stuff from me, and I can send them something as well, because I do appreciate the fishermen now that have been giving me all the kind accolades about being a stay-at-home dad, and they tell me about their kids, and some of them sent me pictures of them and their kids, and I appreciate that stuff so much. So don't be nervous, and tell your listeners to please be, please share with their thoughts and stories with me, because I do appreciate it. I really like being in the community like this and being to help anybody catch more fish. That's what it's all about, is all of us just having a better day on the water for us, for our kids, and catching more big bass. It's just a fun thing to do. Just practice catch and release when you can. That's all. Dude,
absolutely. Now, I know a lot of guys would love for you to give them a swim bait lesson. But me personally, I like to come down there and just, go through the tackle room.
Gary Klein said something. He said, now that you're retired, Gary told me this. He said, what you need to do, if I found the time, was to start doing swim bait guide trips, where I just do a trip where you fly into San Antonio, we go to a lake. It's not really about catching fish, but bring your rods, bring your reels, bring your baits, and we spend a day or 2 on the water just dialing somebody in on. And it wouldn't be so much a fish catching guide trip. It would be and Gary said there's a big market for this. You could actually just do these personal day guide trips where you bring how to modify a bait, how to tune a swim bait, which most guys don't know how to tune swim baits, just all the stuff we're talking about times 10, one-on-one on the water. And I think that'd be a great opportunity someday to start doing swim bait guide trips. And again, it's just taking everything I know, everything I could possibly teach a guy, and sharing it with him on a boat for a day.
Dude, you got something there. Sign me up.
I'd love to. Before I get too old, I should probably do it. Just host them and say, fly into San Antonio. There's a really good lake close by, Choke Canyon. We might catch a couple big ones, but at the very least, we're going to go out there and we're going to talk rods and reels and line and cadence and how to hold the rod. Something happened at Clear Lake. Just side note, there were a million guys trying to catch fish in that corner. And if you didn't have that rod in the right position and the reel gear ratio right and the cadence right, you could smoke 20 boats around you. And it was so subtle, but it was so pronounced for the fish. And that's the kind of thing I'd like to be able to teach people on the water. It's one thing to tell them, but the line can be too tight. The rod can be in the wrong place. The gear ratio could be wrong. And it'd be like a tennis player teaching the perfect forehand or backhand. And I would love to do that opportunity to start, doing swim bait guide trips here in San Antonio.
Dude, I think a lot of people would pay good money to do that. And I don't mean that as in, if you don't got the money, you can't learn swim bait. But there's people that sincerely struggle with fishing certain techniques, and they're willing to pay good money to, I don't even mean master it, just feel confident in what they're doing. I mean, there's guys all over where I live at, they're doing electronics classes, side scan, down scan, how to use your maps. And dude, they're getting $300 to $500 a day just to do that. And I'm like, dude, I've mastered the X15 back in the day. I could find a bass on that thing, but no one was paying me any money to show them how to use it.
Yeah, yeah. These guys, if you're going to spend 70,000 for a boat and you're going to buy all these rods and reels, to go out with somebody, and Gary Klein told me on it, he says you could teach a swim bait guide class and literally just pick your schedule, the days that you're free, if you have some free time, and really, again, it's not about going out and catch. We're not going to catch a bunch of fish. We might catch some really good ones, we might not, but at the very least, you're going to learn how to fish a swim bait today, so that when you go back home, you'll have it down. Your rod will be right, your reel will be right, your line will be right. You'll know how to clip the tail. You'll know how to adjust for things. You'll know how to, make things work better. If it's not working this way, it works better this way. It's just, I think Gary's gone to something, and I should probably do that. I think he does that. He does personal guide trips up there in the Dallas Fort Worth area for certain techniques. And I think a technique guide thing for swim baits guys might come from around the country just to learn how to fish a swim bait for a day, because it sure would help them if they went back home and utilized it.
You know what's going to happen? I'm fixing to get a lot of messages how to get a hold of you for a swim bait trip. But out of respect, I'm not going to give your information out. I never do that. But hopefully, maybe you can get you a YouTube or something like that. I know you're not. I couldn't find you on social media, and actually, that's a good thing. I applaud you if you're not on social media, because it can be pretty brutal.
Yeah, I'm not. After the whole Bachelor thing, I got worked on social media for the Bachelor. After the Bachelor, I checked out. Reality TV, there's some pretty weird people that watch that show, and 10 million people watch television. I'm like, I'm not doing social media.
Well, no offense, but I don't think my wife didn't watch it, because I had to explain to her once again last night. I said, I got to do the podcast with Byron. She said, well, who's that? And I had to explain. She's like, was he really on there? I'm like, yes, and she's on Google and all that. And she goes, wow, that's crazy. And I was like, well, yeah. I said, he's the old school Bachelor.
Oh, season 6, man. I mean, they've had like 100 of them. They should have I'm probably one of the oldest. I think I'm the oldest Bachelor. I was the oldest Bachelor when I was there. I'm probably the oldest one ever, but I was season 6, and that was, 1990, or no, 2000, 2005, 2006.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm going to kind of embarrass myself. I've watched a lot of it, because when the wife's watching it, you might as well just sit on the phone and watch it with her, because she's not turning the channel.
Jimmy Houston walked up to me. He said, you turned all of us into a knitting circle. Jimmy Houston and I were at a promotion right after The Bachelor. He said, you got me and every angler you've ever known calling each other, asking why he didn't give her a rose, and why didn't he pick that one, and how does he still have that one? Jimmy Houston was laughing his butt. He goes, there's not one of us. He goes, and it's all of us. And I knew Jimmy. I've known Jimmy forever. But he goes, oh yeah. He goes, the whole crew of professional anglers who you'd never guess are all watching because there's a bass fisherman as the Bachelor. I was dying. I go, I'm sorry to put you through that, Jimmy. He goes, no, it was fun. We were all hooked on it. Our wives were laughing at us because we couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, that's crazy. I've met Jimmy when I was a little bitty. He's a good dude. I will say, I think you might have him in the hair category. The style needs a little updated on Jimmy.
The bowl cut.
Yeah.
Oh. Yep, but he kept it. He's kept it all those years, so he still has his bowl cut. But man, I appreciate you having me on. I really
no problem, man. You text me anytime if you ever need anything. Got your number. If I come across some crazy swim baits, you may get a random message from me every now and then. I got some here. I'm not, man. I'd love to show him, but I'm not gonna bother him with the mess I've got. So, but Byron, I appreciate it, man. I'm going to stop recording this, and guys, make sure you check out Byron's Bunker on eBay and mention you heard him here on Baitman Raw, and he'll throw you something special in. And once again, thank you, Byron, for joining the show.